afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our last caregivers for this year, but don't worry, we'll be back in January. It is my pleasure to introduce and welcome you all to a very, very popular talk today. My name is Christine Kennedy, and on behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement and McMaster Continuing Education, I'd like to thank you for joining us this afternoon. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we reside, McMaster University, recognizes and acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee Nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Before I begin, for those of you who are regulars, you know I always do a little bit of housekeeping. As I mentioned a few minutes ago in the introduction, we had such a huge demand for this. We actually couldn't accommodate everyone on our Zoom platform. So for those of you who are joining us on a live stream, unfortunately, you won't be able to interact with us. So there's no chat function. But for those who are in the Zoom, as always, our chat function is open and we welcome you to post any of your comments or your experiences. Just be mindful that it is open to the public, so you might not want to put too much personal information in there. We also have a closed captioning feature in Zoom. To activate it, if you click, there's a little thing that says more on the bottom. If you click that, and then you can click live transcript, and then that will come up. And as always, this talk is being recorded. So if you'd like to pass the information along to friends or family members, will be able to do that. We'll give you a link to that recording probably within the next day or so, because it's being live streamed. It will be almost immediate. So with all of the housekeeping out of the way, it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. We have Donna Thomson and Laurel Gillespie joining us for a fantastic talk. Donna is a caregiver, author, and educator. She is the author of 2 best-selling books on caregiving, including The Unexpected Journey of Caring. Donna also facilitates the free online course for caregivers, Caregiving Essentials, and she is the co-designer and of the Creating Caregiver-Friendly Workplace course and co-designer and co-director of the Family Engagement and Research Program here at McMaster. And joining Donna today is Laurel Gillespie. Laurel is the CEO of the Canadian Hospice and Palliative Care Association, as well as the lead of its Advanced Care Planning Canada, otherwise known as ACPC, initiative. ACPC focuses on an accessible pan-Canadian framework for advanced care planning. Laurel is committed to making a positive impact in the field of hospice palliative care through innovation, advocacy, and education. And let me tell you, she is quite a remarkable woman, and I look forward to hearing more about Laurel and Donna. Thanks, Donna. I'll hand it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's what a pleasure it is to be here today with you, Laurel. And I want to jump right in. Laurel, I want to ask you who is Laurel Gillespie and what brought you to hospice and palliative care, and also to create this amazing resource that we have here in Canada called advancedcareplanning.ca. And I think you'll need to unmute.
Thank you, Donna and Christine, for that warm welcome. I'm tickled pink to be here today and always happy to share my knowledge, which hopefully becomes wisdom for all of you to carry forward as my journey in caregiving and having to be cared for all at the same time, wrapped into one. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm joining in today from the Anishinaabe unceded territory, which is colonially known as the Ottawa area. So my journey really began in palliative care. It goes back, I'm the youngest of 8 children from Atlantic Canada. My grandmother was trained as a nurse in Boston during World War I. I know I'm the youngest of big families, right? But she was a nurse and she died at home in 1986. And I thought that was kind of weird. Why would my grandmother be dying at home? But that really spurned and opened my eyes to what's possible for people when they're nearing end of life. So although it was bizarre at the time, it really has come full circle for me. I was married almost 25 years to a naval officer, and I've lived in 5 Canadian provinces and outside of the country. And when I was 38, we were posted here to the Ottawa area. And I had twins that were 3 and had a new baby that arrived. And at the same time, my mother-in-law moved from Toronto to live with us, and she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. She was also a bit of a wanderer. So she couldn't be left alone. So I had to pivot my own work schedule around that. And I don't want to make this too long-winded, but when I was 38, my youngest was 6, my twins were 9, I was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer. So it was not a very good diagnosis. I was very sick. I lost both breasts. I went through chemo, I went through radiation. And right after my first chemotherapy treatment, I wound up in isolation in the hospital because my immune system crashed. And as I lie there in a hospital bed, realizing that I don't have any family in the Ottawa area, my husband's at home taking care of our children and his mom, I've got a 20% chance of making it for 5 years, which means there's an 80% chance that in 5 years from now, I'm not going to be here and I'm not done yet. What is that going to look like? And it really threw me off guard. And I thought, I really need to put some thought into how I can make this work, not only for myself and my family, but what is best for me in this. I don't want to be alone in a hospital. And lo and behold, I got better through the graciousness and the talent of the oncology team here in Ottawa, and a lot of hard work and positive mindset. But nonetheless, I ended up divorcing because things didn't work out well after my mother-in-law passed away. And she was only not with us for 5 days, other than a couple of times when we had to put her in care during my chemotherapy treatments because I was that sick. So I was a caregiver while needing to be cared for. Family members come in and offset that. But when I went back to school at 45, I did an MBA, and during my marketing course, it wasn't a thesis program, but a marketing course program. My marketing course, I wanted to do a research paper on marketing advanced care planning. I'd heard about this. It was still relatively new. Australia was doing a great job, and I wanted to put QR codes on our health card so that knowing what it was like as a caregiver with my mother-in-law, it's like what medications and what's her blood type, and thought it would be cool to have this instantaneous access to all that information at the tap of a card. Lo and behold, I took quite a bit of criticism for it, but I still dream of that one day, to have advanced care planning be readily available. So in a long wound way, that's kind of how I ended up in this role, was through my work around advanced care planning and that paper and an opportunity that come up at CHPCA.
Wow. I mean, it's an unbelievable story, Laurel. And, it's such a tribute to your character and your imagination, and that you've been able to create something so fantastic for our country, that came from your own experiences, and these very challenging experiences. So I wonder if you can tell us, um, in terms of advanced care planning, there's been so much interest today in this topic. Um, and I've looked at the website myself, and I've begun to do my own advanced care plan too. And my husband and I recently we redid our wills, and so that's really what got me thinking about it for my own self and our own family. And I will say right up front that the extent when we redid our wills and we did a basic letter of what I would want, and got that done, I did feel so good about it. So this is not a downer. I just wanted to put that out there. It felt really good. I felt like I had just given a gift to my kids. So I guess my first question is, what exactly is advanced care planning? Like, describe what it is.
So it's really a process about being able to convey to someone whom you trust what are the values and wishes that are most important to you as a person. And your wishes or your desires are things that you might want for yourself, for your health and your personal care. And what choices would you make for yourself? In the event that you weren't able to convey that yourself, who would you want to have representing you in a supportive way to be able to convey what's most important to you? So it should be documented, and I'm going to use the having lived in 5 provinces model as a military wife, that wherever you moved, like there's 13 different jurisdictions in our country, unfortunately, when it comes to this. So I see advanced care planning as being something that's kind of blended and recognized across the country, but it's not a legal document.
Okay.
But in the absence of those legal documents, it does become a vehicle by which that you can express and have your wishes and your values and what's important to you for your personal and your health care through someone whom you trust. And with that, just like you said, Donna, when you participate in this process, and it's not a one and done, like going to a lawyer and doing a will or a power of attorney. This is a document that's meant to be revisited, particularly as you go through life milestones, like a divorce or an illness. You buy a house, like sometimes things will change. And I am a veteran. I consider myself to be a veteran caregiver. I've taken care of my former mother-in-law, and then my current partner, his mother came to live with us, and I took care of her. And I can tell you from both of those experiences, I've taken care of someone who didn't have an advanced care plan. And then the next time around, it was like, we're doing this. And it took almost a year to get her to participate and really fully open up, but we got it done. And I can't begin to tell you that for me personally, and I won't speak for others, but it was the greatest gift that she ever could have given to me as a caregiver to her. Because you're not left wondering, did I make the right decision? Was that really what she would have wanted in this circumstance? I'll use an example of dialysis. It was, okay, well, I'll try the dialysis. She didn't like it. After that, she was like, no, I'm not doing this. And it was like, okay, no, she says no to dialysis. It's off the table, right? Like it is the greatest gift that you can give to those that you love, and for those that love you, because they're not left with the burden of wondering, oh my gosh, did I do the right thing? And I think that's marvelous. Yeah, so it's really about documenting, thinking about what you would want, reflecting on it, sharing it with at least one supportive decision maker. It can be more than one person. Often cases are that someone will choose their life partner, and that's maybe not always the best person, because sometimes difficult decisions are going to be made. And maybe when it comes right down to the wire, maybe they're not going to be able to make those hard decisions. So it could be a daughter, like my youngest daughter is my supportive decision maker. So it really can be someone that you trust, but have those conversations regularly about what does matter to you, what brings you joy on your, really tough days. What is it that brings you peace and happiness? And being able to share that with someone else, so they'll have a better idea of how to best meet your needs when the tough gets going.
It's so interesting. Like, I guess the first question that is in my head as I'm listening to you is, this document is really to share. It's a document to be shared with somebody or a small group of people that you deeply trust. So does the person, you used the term supportive decision maker, and I want you to explain what exactly that means. And is a supported decision maker also, does that person have to be a power of attorney? Where does the POA fit in
Yeah.
with this other
Oh,
role?
that's such a great question, Donna. Like, this is not by any means a legal document, but in the absence of formal legal documents like a power of attorney, which can be quite expensive and not everybody can afford it, this is the next best thing in the absence of that. So in our beautiful country of Canada, we have 13 different jurisdictional systems of how our healthcare is delivered. And so in one province, you're supported or supportive decision maker. We tend to prefer the term supportive. That it could be called your proxy. It could be called like there's a different name pretty much in each province. So nationally as an organization, we like the term supportive or supported decision maker, but supportive is nice. So this is not a legal document, but in the absence of something legal, which often when it comes down to the wire and you need that power of attorney, it's too late. Or your loved one is maybe in care, they can't reach somebody in the middle of the night, things are not going well. Somebody says, oh, well, so-and-so has power of attorney. Okay, where are the documents? Where did it get squirreled away? Because that's often what happens. We put it away in a secret spot and maybe we haven't communicated. Often our children don't even live in the same city or same province as us anymore. Like things have changed over the years, and particularly since COVID, we've learned that these things are not always readily accessible, the legal documents. So in the absence of this is a good, like a substitute for it. So this document, you can put it in a video, you can put it in a written format, you can use our beautiful new guide that we just finished producing that made advanced care planning as accessible to as many Canadians as possible by using the universal design so that we can meet the needs of as many Canadians as we can through this process. Again, I aspire that one day, in addition to maybe our QR code, something as simple as when you go to the hospital, who's your emergency contact? Wouldn't that maybe often be the same person that we would choose to convey our wishes and what's important to us when we're not doing okay, or there's a sudden event? But it also recognizing that it is difficult to start these conversations.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking through the idea of timing, because as we know, if someone, and we've had a number of questions come in from registrants on the topic of capacity, cognitive impairment, disability, if a person is not able to give a power of attorney, or they are through because of, like, say, Alzheimer's, dementia, disease progression. In those cases, you cannot kind of pull a power of attorney out of the air when a person has lost capacity. It's just not possible. And no lawyer would ever draw one up on that basis. So I'm thinking that in terms of, as they say, getting your ducks in a row, am I right in assuming that the advanced care planning is the first thing you want to do in a series of things you want to do?
And I would never knock the legislative or the jurisdictional differences in Canada. They are what they are. But I think there's an opportunity here. I kind of, it's like the four wins. It's a win for you as a caregiver. It's a win, obviously, for the patient or the person involved. It's a win for the healthcare providers. And oh my goodness, it's a win for the hospital administrators and, dare I say, governments, because it saves money. I do believe that, and the whole idea, and I can't take credit for coming up with advanced care planning. It already existed before I showed up on scene. But we've kind of trying to take it to the next level and normalize this as part of natural life planning. Just like you start your RSPs, you save to buy a house, you graduate from university. Now life's getting a bit more serious, and we all know, at least I know, because I'm in that age bracket, that, oh geez, once you hit 50, it's time for that colonoscopy, right? Like, really, I mean, who wants to go through that? But that's what we know, right? That's the time, that's when the trigger is. But I think there's a real opportunity around advanced care planning that people as young as 16 should be participating in this. And I think of when I sent my daughter off to go to, my youngest, to go off to university, and kind of like, oh, well, I'm 1,500 miles away. What does that look like if something happens? Kids go to university and they do things, right? And what would happen if she couldn't, if she suddenly unconscious or couldn't convey what she wanted? there's that to fall back on. But, kids turn 16, they get a driver's license, they can decide to donate their organs. And if we're putting them behind the wheels of a car, wouldn't that be a great time to have them start thinking about, well, what if I was in that car accident? What would I want to have happen next? What does that look like? And get them to start thinking about it. But when you mention people that have Alzheimer's or dementia, or through whatever particular case it might be, with a disability or neurodivergent situation where people maybe don't have the same capacity, not to say that some don't, but this is the biggest and strongest message that I would wish to convey about that, is it's never too early to start this process. The time to do it is when you are healthy and of sound mind, when you are able to have these conversations with a clear mind, right?
Mhm.
And I can tell you, like, the time to not start thinking about this is when you're in a crisis. And as someone who's received that diagnosis of, yeah, you're really sick, kid. My doctor that had been seeing me at the high-risk breast clinic for 6 years said, yeah, you're really sick, kid, and it's not going to be good. And if I don't take both breasts, you're going to be back here in 2 years, and you'll either be having the other one removed or you're going to be dead. Like, it was like, whoa. But I knew this doctor fairly well over the years. And, the time to do it ideally is when you have the opportunity to have these conversations, and it's never too early with anyone to start having them.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just keeping my eye on the chat as well. Um, and I just want to read a message from Joanne, who says in BC, the POA is a legal document that appoints a person who is authorized by a capable adult to make financial, business, and/or property decisions on their behalf. Um, the POA may not make healthcare decisions. So, um, you know, we just finished going through this. So we have a POA for health and one for financial. Are most provinces similar in that there are separate health and material goods?
Yeah, it's hard to have a full grasp on the 13 different systems. Ontario is another example of that. You have power of attorney for personal care, and then you have power of attorney for financial. But it's those are great in their appointment. They're important, but not everybody can afford to participate in that.
Yeah.
And it's a very intimidating, like, I think of new Canadians as an example, or someone that, their first language is not French or English. How confusing this must be to them. They maybe don't have like additional family members in Canada. But the interesting thing about advanced care planning is it's more and more readily becoming recognized as, oh, this is what's important to that individual around when we really think about person-centered care.
Mhm.
What is it that makes that person unique? What is it that person most holds near and dear to them, or their values, whether it be cultural, spiritual, the kinds of foods, like, don't give me I have a food allergy to that. Like, and every advanced care plan is going to look different. Mine's going to look different than yours to another person. Like, there's not going to be any two same advanced care plans, but it's becoming more and more recognized as, oh, this is a great thing to have. And it's not a guarantee and it's not a legal document, but it is becoming more widely accepted as, oh, well, if we truly do want to be delivering person-centered care, then this is a gap. We need to have some of this information to truly honor and meet that individual where they're at.
Mhm.
Um, and
Yeah.
again, like, we can't predict sudden events. So, I was going to dinner last evening and I saw a pedestrian be struck by a car in the dark rain in Ottawa. It was like, oh, like, you just never know. So the more you can be prepared, the better in the long run. And the time to do it is before you're in a crisis situation, or in a state where you're not able to really think clearly about what is really important to you.
Yeah. So I know that on advancedcareplanning.ca, there is a guide, and you can download the guide and you can fill in. There are all these prompt questions, and you can fill it in. There we go. And can you just give us a couple of ideas of what kind of questions are in the guide?
So questions, like there's different sections and it's all color coded. Each section has different stories that are relatable to them, but there's prompts such as, what are values? What does a good day look like for you? Is it getting to the local pool for a swim and being around water? What do you like to do throughout your day? What are your hobbies? Who do you like to spend time with? There's another section that's about your values and your wishes. And then you can record them down. So it's laid out quite nicely and it's met universal design principles so that it is as absolutely accessible as possible. But it's lengthy and people are like, oh my God, that's so long. But this is more of the guide that takes your hand and walks you through the process. But another example would be, oh my goodness, who would be in my supportive network? Who would be in my circle of care that I would entrust to bring in? Okay, so think about, what if there was an emergency? Who are the top 3 people that you would call to come to your aid? Right? Likely one of those 3 people, maybe all of them, would be your supportive decision makers in your care if you were not able to convey those for yourself.
Yeah.
Does that do you want some more examples? What do you do for comfort? What is pain like for you? How do you best manage your pain? Like some people, for me, I love my heated bean bags. Other people, it might be something different, right? And then this gives you a place to actually record what those answers look like. But there's also, this plan was created by, and you can put your name on it. And then I was helped by my supportive decision maker, and then you can have different names that you can put. I last reviewed my plan on. So again, it reminds you that this is not a one and done and it doesn't get squirreled away. You share this and you talk about it often.
Yeah. It's interesting because, when I think about a very dear friend who is currently in the very last stages of Alzheimer's, early onset Alzheimer's, and, I was speaking with her husband recently, and we were talking about, he was telling me that when they were younger, they said, "Oh, if I'm ever, incapacitated, that because my friend had the disease in her family, and they'd witnessed family members in advanced stages of the disease, and they said to each other when they were younger, "Gosh, I never want to live like that." And many people say, "Oh, if I ever broke my neck, if I was ever a wheelchair user, I would not want to live like that." But lo and behold, something happens to you, and it becomes, and there's plenty of evidence to show that people who do become paraplegics because of a spinal cord injury normalize their love of life within, I think it's about 2 years it takes to go back to your baseline of before you were disabled. So your perspective on what is a good life, what can bring you joy, will often change, even in the sort of most severe conditions of being diminished because of disease progression. So, my question for you, Laurel, is uh, how does that play out over time, and how does revisiting your advanced care plan help um, when your perspective is changing on um, what is a good life? Because we know that, all of a sudden, if you lose your hearing, you think, well, as long as I don't go blind, but then you go blind. And then you think, well, as long as something else, and we're all like that. It's human nature, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, Donna. That's a really good point. And again, you're going to have a different answer from everyone, right? Um, and I guess the point of revisiting it often is because the more that we're exposed to different scenarios, it gives us an opportunity to reflect. But that moment that somebody says, "Oh, if I was ever in that situation," that's your opening. That's the beginning of they're trying to really take a moment to listen to them and say, Well, you know what? I see where you're coming from. Have you ever thought about advanced care planning, or could we pick up this conversation and can we talk about this often? Or talk about it later, or when we can we think about it and revisit it or come back to it, or ask them some probing questions. Tell me more about that. Um, what else would you think of? And do you ever think about documenting that? Because it might be really important down the road. I mean, and this is different from a DNR, right? Like a do not resuscitate or advanced directives. There are those, but they're simply just a check in the box. And maybe you have the check in the box. Like I'm going to use this my own experience with my own father he had do not resuscitate. But again, this is back a while ago, but well, where is it? How do we know he has a DNR? He had moved provinces. So it was like what existed in one province now doesn't exist in the other. Like it gets really complicated, which again, I think is why we need to have these conversations and talk about them. And then it's okay if you change your mind. And isn't that the beautiful thing about, I don't know, for me getting older, it's like, oh, the more I know, the more I feel a little bit challenged. But yeah, I know what my points are. If I got to the point where I can't remember those who are closest to me, if I can't, I guess this is coming from a caregiver, if I'm not able to take care of my personal needs,
Mhm.
i.e. toileting or feeding myself, like, okay, I need some time out and really think about what does that look like. So this is why I think it's important to continue the dialogue. I don't think I'm going to be in that state in the next few years. But by having these conversations regularly with my own daughter, um, she knows, like, I'll use the example of this doesn't have to be all morbid, and it's not sunshine, rainbows, and lollipops either. But my daughter clearly knows that if I were ever in a situation where I was having to be in bed for a long time and wasn't able to do some of those things, but I was maybe going to pull through and get better, please bring a pair of tweezers in your handbag, because if I have a little hair on my chin, or to just take care of in between my eyebrows for me, that's important to me. Doesn't mean that that's the end for me, but that's something, if I'm not able to do that for myself, that somebody that I entrust would take care of those little details, right? So it really is different to everyone. But having those conversations and what that looks like to you is very personal. And be selective about who you want to share those most intimate, deeper thoughts about what you would want your own healthcare to look like. And again, there's no guarantee, but as a caregiver that's taken care of somebody with one and without, I can't begin to tell you how less stressful it was. And that's partly why I believe it's so important to convey your wishes and your values and any little habits or rituals that you might have that can be made available to the best of our ability in, whatever setting you're in, is also important, particularly today after what we've been through with COVID.
Yeah. I just want to mention that Jennifer from our team at McMaster has just put the website for advanced care planning and the guide in the chat. So it's in there a couple of times throughout. People are welcome to click on it and have a little look as we're speaking. It's also, I think, because sometimes today we're talking about the caregiver and, reducing stress on the caregiver. But I think thinking about the example that you used about dialysis, it can really reduce stress on the patient as well, right? So, which in turn is going to help reduce stress on the caregiver as well. So, if for example, your physician um, tells you what your treatment's going to look like, and walks you through, hopefully walks you through um, what your treatment options are going to be, and you can say, I want this, but not that. At and then you've kind of visualized it, hopefully with the help of other patients and support groups, and of course your clinicians can help you visualize your illness journey, and you can then pick and choose like you would on a buffet table. There's certain stuff here that I know that I won't be able to tolerate. So going through and, as you say, letting people know, it kind of when that happens, you're asked at the hospital, you have to tell me now, do you want this treatment? You've already made the decision, right? So it's,
Yeah, and it's learning, like some people want to, I'm one of those, I can't get enough information, so tell me everything that you can possibly tell me, and then you learn as much as you possibly can about it, so you're better equipped to make decisions later on, right? But who's to say too, like the case with my almost mother-in-law, was that she also had it used to be referred to as comorbidities, but co-occurring disorders. So COPD and breast cancer, and she had lung cancer. And then it was her kidneys were failing, and it was like, yeah, this dialysis thing, thanks, but no thanks. Right. But I knew that, and there was like nobody was going to push her, oh, please have another dialysis. No, because her body was clearly shutting down, right? That's very normal. And we've become very uncomfortable with what that can look like and accepting things for what they are. And so again, like the more you can learn about your own condition, the better, I believe, to help you make as best a decision as you can during most difficult times. But who's to say that what you choose today, 5 years from now, there might not be a new, miracle drug, or there might be a new, more curative or treatment available that could extend your life, as long as it has its quality of life to what is important to you, right?
yeah. Well, an example there in my own family would be that our son, Nicholas, he's 36 now, but he went on palliative care when he was 15 and he survived. At the time, though, when he was 15, one of the things that happened to him, because he has cerebral palsy and he's medically complex, um, he I was pushing his wheelchair and his foot came into contact with the back of our van in the garage, and it broke his leg just touching. So um, we knew then that he had severe osteoporosis. So the doctor said, you know, we needed to fill out do not resuscitate for him, because that if they did chest compressions on him in CPR, it would have done him huge harm. Um, but then we said we did want antibiotics, we did want all these other things. But then when he got treatment of these infusions to build his bone strength, he he doesn't have osteoporosis anymore, so there's no more do not resuscitate. So this is an example of how things can change. Um, and so a practical question, Laurel, if somebody's really interested in thinking today, gosh, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it today. How do they go about getting the guide? Do they have to download it? Do they have to print it? Can they fill it in online? How does one access it?
So all of our resources are available for free, either through the CHPCA website or our separate one for a www advance without a D, so advancecareplanning.ca. And as I mentioned previously, the new resources that we've just are launching, the My Advanced Care Planning Guide, the 68-page one, you can print it, and it's designed so that it doesn't use a lot of ink. It's paper heavy though. You can print it off in black and white, but as an example, we had 5,000, and within 3 days of us releasing the new guide, they were gone. Like that was it. So then we had to find more money, and thanks to contribution through Health Canada, we were able to do another print. So those are coming. So as I mentioned, this one's kind of like the one that really takes your hand, like for the first timers, for the ACP rookies out there. Or if somebody's not familiar, it really helps guide you through that process. And I recommend before you try introducing this to someone else, go through the process yourself. But everything is free. It is available to download online. Coming in January, you will be able to complete it online virtually and save it and come back to it. And we'll also be releasing the mini guide, which is a shorter, more condensed version of this. So imagine if you took a piece of paper and folded it in half and did 3 pieces like that. And it's kind of like, if it's something that you've done before and you just need to tweak it a little bit or add something new, that will be available as well. Did that kind of answer your question?
It did.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you can send an email to request if you need some hard copies. Like there are volunteers all across Canada that go out in their communities and host workshops. You don't have to be a medical professional to do this. You can volunteer to do this at your own community level. But again, the resources are there to be used in whatever community, the 55 plus club, or within community churches or places of religion, schools, universities. So they are available at the community level, but normally they flow through us and we mail them out.
And if someone wanted to find somebody to hold their hand and walk them through it and have a little group like you're describing, could you call it advanced care planning and find a group in your area? Is that the sort of information that the organization can provide?
Yep, absolutely. But if somebody wants to do this in a group, any of the in-person ones are normally led by a facilitator through local hospices or hospice programs. So I would recommend, some provinces do have their very own advanced care planning guides that are specific to the legislative and jurisdictional rules in that province. But this is the national one that's kind of like a blanket, covers you wherever you are. And there's also more of a legal principle guide that we have that delineates the differences between the provinces and what the legal documents are. And in the absence of those, each province and territory has a hierarchical system that they go through to choose someone to make those decisions for you. And I don't think it happens often. I don't know what those statistics are. There is very few statistics in palliative care to begin with, but on advanced care planning, but it can come right down to a court making decisions when you haven't identified someone. So it is a very important thing, but it's available to anybody who wants to do it.
Okay, that's great. I was just looking to find out sort of what other information can you get, or is it appropriate to call? Um, uh, there's somebody to answer the phone there if you have questions.
Yep, or send us an email because we do work in 100% virtual environment as a not-for-profit charity. We're trying to save dollars in every way we can. So we work 100% virtually, but somebody will answer your email through the info line, and we do have phone numbers available that comes through to our computers.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. And I know that there's so much rich information being shared in the chat too. So I do draw people's attention to that. People are being generous and lots of knowledge and skills being shared here today. I, you know, we got so many questions that were sent in from the registrants who are here today. And there were quite a few questions about medical assistance in dying and how that relates to advanced care planning. Can you speak to that?
I can speak to it briefly. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination an expert on MAID. It's a very complex topic, and our policy at Canadian Hospice Palliative Care Center really focuses around that, it's not up to us to decide what's right for another human being. That's a very personal, and who am I as in a leadership role, or who is the organization to decide what's right for another person? So we're very respectful of that. It is the law in our country for it to be able to be offered. However, my biggest fear is that I don't want to see MAID overtake or MAID become so popular in the absence of access to quality palliative care, right? It shouldn't become the default. It shouldn't become, oh, you have a mental illness, so now you qualify because your life doesn't have value, or a disability, or, And this is something I'm in conversations with each of the provinces right now about what track 2 requests look like in their respective provinces. But it is very complex. But there is no section in here for MAID. That's a whole separate process from this. But there's certainly no reason why you couldn't say, if I got to this point, then, you know, I would like to have MAID carried out. But that process in and of itself is a process. This is more of a document that gives you some personal reassurance that what is important to you, treat it as a human being, and being able to live through your illness with dignity and grace, and having your honors, your wishes honored in a very respectful way. MAID is an entirely separate process in and of itself, with its own legal requirements. So one is not akin to the other. Doesn't mean that you can't put, oh, if I reach this point one day, then yeah, please try to help me get MAID. And that's okay. We don't say, no, you can't put that in there. By absolutely no means would we ever dare to say that to anyone. But my biggest concern as the CEO of Canadian Hospice Palliative Care Association, that MAID becomes the default in the absence of access to quality palliative care. And that's part of our mission, and we're in the hot pursuit of making that happen in Canada, because it's it's not easy.
Thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, we had a very interesting, actually, interview, or one of our webinar series was with an academic and medical doctor involved in education around medical assistance in dying. So you're welcome to look for that on the Caregiving Essentials YouTube channel if you are interested in that. But I love what you said, because I'm a firm believer, and we've had Dr. Sammy Winemaker and Dr. Cian Cial from the Waiting Room Revolution here as guests as well. So I think that the palliative care approach to serious and critical illness is about a sensitive personal approach to deep comfort, and maximizing life, until you die. And so I think that I don't know anyone who doesn't want that. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I guess let me just go to the questions. But while I'm doing that, Laurel, can you again mention some of the and Jennifer Rutkowski will put them in the chat. She's on our team. But if you would again go through some of the links that people may want to look at, and I'm just going to quickly look at the questions, because I think Jen was saying, which was the one that did not have the letter D in it? We just want to make sure we get them all today.
Oh, advancecareplanning.ca. So www.advancecareplanning, all one word, .ca.
Oh,
And I can give you links to all of the documents, and it include like conversation starters. I'm just going to touch back while you look at your questions, and just share with everybody that I know, death and dying, E comes before Y, but it's like this dun dun dun, death and dying, right? But it should be the reverse. Death is simply about one moment in time that one takes their last breath. It's the dying part that leads up to the ultimately a death, but it's that dying part. And so that people have an opportunity to live their best life possible during that time. Almost 18 years later, I didn't think I'd be here today talking about this, right? So I was considered palliative, like, oh, okay, well, she doesn't have, the prognosis is not good, and no, we're just going to hammer her with chemo and radiate her as best as we can and hope for the best, right? It wasn't fun, but my point being is it's not the dun 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 death and dying. It's about dying resulting in death? And what does that dying look like to you as an individual? And how can we work together to honor an individual, respect their wishes, even if they do choose MAID? That's, in some essences, dare I say, is considered maybe a palliative approach to care, because it's really about giving that person dignity, giving them ownership, respecting their wishes, and allowing them to peacefully pass with dignity. Again, I don't believe, we're not for it or against it, but I don't want it to become the default in the absence of access to quality palliative care, which often the case is that somebody could be in a palliative position and have MAID on the ticket only to get their pain or symptom management under control and feeling good, to say, yeah, no, I'm good with this now. Like, I don't feel like I need it. And people have reversed their decision, which happens also, but it's not often talked about. And another important piece about a palliative approach to care is the grief and bereavement services, that it's part of that continuum of care. Is, I know for myself personally, I wasn't afraid of the dying or the death part. It was what I was leaving behind where I wasn't finished yet. That's what terrified me. And to know with a palliative approach to care that grief and bereavement is part of that, and helping to take care of the ones that you're leaving behind, was really important to me. And I think although MAID services, it's not as readily available, but it's getting better and better, which I'm hopeful for that, because it is a very important part of what a palliative approach to care can look like.
I was just reflecting too that we had quite a few questions as well about people with, how do you help someone with a disability, or a cognitive impairment, or early Alzheimer's, or how do you help someone complete the guide and move through this process of visualizing what works for you or someone you love through an illness and or death and dying, the dying process when there's a serious illness. But I'm thinking too that, like in the case of our son, for example, we have lots of documents that are similar to what you're describing in the guide for him, because he's non-speaking. And so those documents work today. I just came from where he lives in a medical group home. I mean, he lived with us for 23 years, but now he has one-to-one nursing care, and he has a cold. So he's not feeling well. And so, but everyone knows what congestion looks like, how he coughs, how he likes to be comforted. What does pain look like? What are 5 strategies to deal with pain? All of that is well known as part of his care plan. So it can help someone, even if they just have a cold, right?
Absolutely. I think, well, there's quite often when you're in that kind of circumstance, Donna, you're in a role of a caregiver, which I'll talk about who's taking care of the caregiver, because that's going to be a really important piece. And again, it's like a moral imperative to help take care of those who are caregivers. But with the example of your son in that situation, somebody, whether it's a personal support worker or someone who's escorting him or helping him through his day-to-day interactions or day-to-day, I know there's a term for it, you're living your capacity to do day-to-day activities, right? And he doesn't have the ability to convey verbally, but he probably has one way or another how he conveys his message to people, right? How he does communicate that, whatever that looks like to him, is he probably can hear and comprehend just fine, right? What is it that I can do to help you? What is it that you need in this moment? How can I best help you right now? And if they're not able to draw that out, or if you're in pain, can he nod his head? Like, it's very individualized, but I think it's doing those check-ins with people to say, how can I best support you right now with what you're needing? And that worked for me a lot with my mother-in-law with Alzheimer's, right? With confusion but in those moments of lucidity, it's like that window of opportunity to say, oh, have you ever thought about what would happen if, or even like with, people who are not experiencing any cognitive difficulties, is you're in a car and you're both facing forward. You don't have that awkward stare, right? Where you're looking at each other. You're driving in a car straight forward and you can look out the window, but you can broach these conversations because the person's likely not going to be able to get away from you either. Because you're in a car, but you're driving to a medical appointment, let's say, or you're picking them up from their colonoscopy.
Road trip.
And say like, oh, I hadn't thought about this before. I heard about, so and so, and you can just make stuff up if you need to, but just to prompt people to have conversations. But I think the people that are in that circle of care know that individual best and what their communication style is, and how it is that they convey what they're feeling or what they're needing, and being attuned to that and being familiar with it. Is probably if I could say, I'm not a medical professional, so I wouldn't, and I'm not a personal support worker, so I can just speak from my own experiences. Like my son was on the spectrum. Like a lot of children on the spectrum have very difficult time coping with, overstimulation in their environment, lighting, noises that we maybe don't absorb, but they do, and they're not coping. But, being calm and how can I best support you in this moment? Right? And that works for so many situations.
It does. It does. And I think if somebody doesn't feel well, or particularly if they've had a diagnosis that is life-threatening, um, you know, we're going to be stressed, uh, very stressed, and that we need a calm presence. Um, and sort of, I think the structure of advanced care planning is something that gives me personally a lot of reassurance and solace that I have a plan. Otherwise, doesn't it feel like chaos?
Oh, yeah. And I think, I don't know, there's also this I don't, phenomenon. I think it's this, I'm going to speak to the majority of caregivers. Men are coming around, like, and there's a lot of great male caregivers out there, but it often predominantly falls on the shoulders of females or women to be those caregivers. And I think instinctually, and I can't speak for everyone, but for myself, is you want to be the fixer. You're the one who comes in and makes things better, right? So our natural response when somebody's not eating, right? They're starting to not want to eat as much, and all they want to eat is cream with 2 tablespoons of sugar and Rice Krispies or cornflakes. Let them have it. Like their body's telling you something that they're not wanting to, but if they've got a craving for something, let them have it. Um, yeah, it's complicated, but as caregivers, we instinctually want to go in and fix things and make it better. So it's kind of being able to, step away from those in the moment times. When you're in the moment of something, it's like, I got to fix this. Take a step back and say, okay, I don't need to fix this. I need to support that individual. And it's okay to ask them, like, I'm not sure what to do, and I don't want to impose my beliefs or what I think is best. How can I best support and serve you right now?
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
That's a very difficult thing to do when you see loss and you're experiencing grief over that loss. I think it's human, but I also think it's so important to step back and and that deep respect for choice, a personal choice and personal autonomy that is expressed through the advanced care planning tool. Um, I think that hopefully that would give. You talked a little bit at the beginning about looking after two people, one with an advanced care plan and one without, and the person who did not have that plan. Your caregiving experience was incredibly more stressful. And I'm very aware of the time and we're at time, but before we go, I wanted to ask you, Laurel, about your caregiving experience and how you think that advanced care planning can ease the burden of care on caregivers and how it can even possibly help caregivers with their self-care.
Um, I'm good before I just jump into that and being very cognizant of the time, and I really appreciate people being interested in this subject and happy to come back anytime. Is that I think in our own mindset, we have to stop relying on the government healthcare system to do what we should be doing for ourselves. Number one, it's not up to our physician, it's not up to our nurses, it's not up to our PSWs to do this important work for us and being able to just know what to do. And I think by people taking some ownership and some responsibility, it's very liberating to oneself of knowing like I have some control and autonomy over what will happen to me. There's no guarantees, but if I don't do this, there's a lot of what ifs. If I do it, then at least I have a chance of having my needs met. And it's not the responsibility of the government through our universally publicly funded healthcare system to do that and have that onus to do these kinds of things for us. This needs to be embedded as a normal part of life planning. Just like if you're going to go to post-secondary or you're going to, get a pet and you go through all this, pet training and puppy training, whatever. This is an essential component of living your best life ever. It's as important as having, a bank account, as having some kind of estate planning. Often we know more about our own cars than we do about our own bodies or what we might want, right? Like, so I'd say, just like when you turn 50, you need to have that colonoscopy. Maybe when you turn 16 and you get a driver's license, if you're privileged enough, maybe you should start participating in advanced care planning. Right? You have a say, you have some control. I think, and this is where I'll come back to that, the 4 Ws. It's a win for the patient, first and foremost, by having that sense of autonomy or some control over an often uncontrollable dynamic. It's a win for the caregivers for sure, because it removes the burden of, did I make the right decision? Is that what my mother would have wanted? And that alone, again, it's the greatest gift you can give to someone that you love or someone who loves you. We don't always win. It might be chosen family, right? I have 7 siblings. There's some of them I wouldn't want them making decisions on my behalf. Do you know what I mean? So anyhow, I don't want to take up any more time than necessary, but we have to take care of one another. And I think at the end of the day, I know I mentioned this to you before in a previous conversation, is at the end of the day, despite our beliefs, despite what our hobbies and what's important is, we all bleed red. At the end of the day, we're all human beings and we need to do what we can to take care of one another in the best way possible. And this, in my opinion, is a huge opportunity for Canadians to advocate for themselves and what they desire for their future needs.
Beautifully said. And I feel so uplifted by this conversation. Thank you, Laurel, so much for coming today and sharing your personal experience with us, but also this amazing gift you've given to the world, to our country, to help people live their best lives, everybody in the family. And I'm so with you. We'll have another conversation another time about the QR code, because I'm totally with you on that one too. Oh,
It
yeah.
respects all the different jurisdictional rules, right? Because
Yeah,
it's tied
yeah.
to your home province, and a blood type as simple as that, which mine's B positive. So I'm very hopeful, Donna.
Oh, yes. It's such a great idea. Why didn't everybody think of it already? I don't know. Anyway, over to you. Back to you, Christine. Thank you so much, Laurel.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you, Donna and Laurel. Yes, I just would like to reiterate Donna's so much so much information, all really great information. And I don't know if you can see, Laurel, everyone in the chat just really thanking you for the information that you provided, such vital information. And look for part two. I think Donna, Laurel, and I had chatted that we'll do a part two to this conversation about like how to actually fill out an advance care plan. But in the meantime, we do have our next webinar, January 15th. Maybe I'll ask Dave to put up, we don't have the full content yet, but we will look at, there's the save the date. We have Dr. Barry Jacobs, who will be joining Donna for a conversation. He is a clinical psychologist, family therapist, and the author of the book, The Emotional Survival Guide for Caregivers, Looking After Yourself and Your Family While Helping an Aging Parent. As a clinician, he specializes in helping families cope with serious and chronic medical illnesses. He is a frequent contributor on caregiving at the American Association for Retired Persons, that's ARP. He is located in the States, and his work is informed by his own caregiving experiences. So as always, you won't want to miss another conversation with Donna and her guest, who will be Dr. Barry Jacobs. So we will bid you adieu. For those who are tuning in live, thanks for joining us, and I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday break, and we'll see you all back in January. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Laurel, and thanks, Jen. Take care.